If you think you know President Snow, think again. Today we're diving into the sources to map the original psychological blueprint of his tyranny and trace exactly how a District 12 musician planted the seeds of his downfall 64 years early.
Welcome to the deep dive. We've got a stack of great material today. Literary analyses, some really interesting fan theories, and Suzanne Collins' own interviews about why she even revisited Panem in the first place. Our mission isn't just to find Easter eggs.
Oh.
We want to uncover how the seemingly disparate elements of the original trilogy were meticulously seeded during the 10th Hunger Games, forming the political and emotional foundation for Panem's future.
We are absolutely going for the foundational philosophy here. We want to know what was the political argument that Snow bought into, and how did his personal failings become, institutional policy? Let's start with the ultimate source, Collins herself. Why did she choose to rewind the clock?
It wasn't just to write another story, it was thematic. Collins has said she uses the world of Panem as a tool to examine complex ethical questions, specifically elements of just war theory. Right.
So she's asking, was the capital's brutal regime after the war, the games, the oppression, was it a just or necessary reaction to the dark days, or was it just corrupt, disproportionate power?
That immediately elevates the conversation from YA dystopia to, political philosophy. And that angle, I assume, naturally led her to center the story on a young Coriolanus Snow.
Absolutely. The prequel zeroes in on the state of nature debate from the Enlightenment. Hobbes versus Locke. She intentionally took the world back to that Reconstruction period, drawing inspiration from really bitter, difficult historical times like the post-Civil War era in the U.S. and post-World War II Europe.
She grounded this fantasy world in real-world trauma. The sources note that this period was defined by people rebuilding in rubble, massive food shortages, and, this is the key part, deep-seated bitterness and a desperate need to place blame on the enemy, the districts. That confusion and bitterness is the air Snow breathes. And that intense setting provides the perfect context for examining that core tension. Nature versus nurture. Collins directly cited Wordsworth's line, "The child is father of the man," while also engaging with Locke's theory of tabula rasa.
For listeners who might need a quick refresher, tabula rasa is the idea that we start as a blank slate, and our experiences make us who we are. So if Snow starts clean, the capital, the dark days, and his family's ruin, those are his teachers.
Precisely. His experiences, the starvation, the shame of being poor, the fear of the districts, all of that molded him. The groundwork for the President Snow, we know, was intentionally laid in his complicated relationships with, everything. Food, the games, District 12, District 13, and most crucially, women.
But wait a minute. If Snow starts as a blank slate shaped by trauma, how do you explain characters like Tigris, his cousin, or even his friend Sejanus Plinth? They went through the exact same thing, the same deprivation, but turned out fundamentally good. Doesn't that sort of contradict the idea that the environment alone created the monster?
That is the critical contrast, and it's why the sources suggest that Snow's defining characteristic was his controlling nature. Everyone shared that trauma, but Snow responded to it by seeking total authoritarian control. Sejanus sought empathy. Snow sought order through dominance.
That makes perfect sense. His trauma fueled an inherent tendency toward authoritarianism. And that brings us to his ultimate weakness,
Which was the out-of-control emotion of falling in love with Lucy Greybeard. That relationship was a bad combination for a control freak. He couldn't control her, he couldn't possess her, and when she disappeared. His failure to control that emotional experience is what crystallized his transformation into the ruthless tyrant we see later.
Fascinating. So we've established that the trauma made the man. Now let's see how that scarred man took the broken early games and turned them into the capital's most potent political weapon.
The 10th Games were almost unrecognizable compared to what Katniss experiences. Collins noted that right after the war, the capital had no resources. The arena was simply an old sports arena. They literally just threw in the kids and the weapons and turned on the cameras.
It was just ugly,
Yeah.
gruesome, with no psychological manipulation, pure punishment.
Exactly. But the 10th Games were the turning point. The system blows wide open both figuratively and literally when the bomb goes off. And the sources are very clear. Lucy Greybeard's lasting, though unintentional, legacy is that she introduced entertainment to the Hunger Games.
She performed, she charmed, she played the crowd. She turned it from a raw punishment into a viewing event.
Yes, the elaborate, psychologically manipulative games we see in the trilogy, the complex arenas, the sponsors, the celebrity status, they're all a direct result of the lessons the Capitol and young Snow learned during those 10th Games. They realized entertainment was the key to control.
And this ties directly back into Snow's core philosophy, which he flat out states later in the series. I'm thinking of that moment in Catching Fire, where he says the whole system collapses if they release their hold.
That isn't just a political threat he pulls out of thin air. It's a deeply held conviction he developed in his youth. He truly believes the state of nature is chaos, and absolute control is required for stability. The fear that defined his youth becomes his institutional policy.
And you can trace that institutionalization of control right back to her disappearance, too. Like, take the Victor's Village. It always felt like a strange reward for such a terrible ordeal.
The fan theory, which is really well supported, is that the celebrity status and the Victor's Village were implemented in part to stop victors from disappearing like Lucy Gray did. The Capitol lost their star. If they're forced to live in the spotlight, celebrated and watched in their own neighborhood, they have to stick around. It's control through unwanted celebrity.
So it transforms the Victor's Village from a gift into a kind of permanent house arrest. And even the small, meaningful gestures of rebellion were co-opted from his own life.
Like the district tokens, Katniss's Mockingjay pin, Rue's little braid. All those personal items might be a direct result of Snow giving Lucy Gray that small rose case to take into the 10th games. That small act of mentorship and personal connection. It ended up being codified into a sterile, regulated part of the system.
So the very mechanism of rebellion, the tokens, the defiance, the music, it's all born from the Capitol's early, clumsy attempts to control that first star. Let's shift our focus to District 12 geography, which becomes really the sacred ground for the resistance.
The setting overlap is immensely powerful. It binds Katniss's childhood directly to Lucy Gray's escape and legacy. There's a key location, the lake in the woods, where Lucy Gray and the Covey took Snow and Suzanne.
And the original trilogy tells us that this same lake is where Katniss's father took her, teaching her about the woods. It's the same place where, in Mockingjay, Katniss sings The Hanging Tree for apropos.
Not only that, but the Covey house, near the meadow, is where Katniss and her family live in the first book. It's a literal shared space, consecrated by music and poverty, connecting two female rebels 60 years apart.
The passing of the musical torch across time is the most compelling thread for me. When Katniss sings the lullaby deep in the meadow to Rue in the arena, that moment isn't just about tenderness.
No, it directly parallels Maud and Lucy Gray singing by that same lake decades earlier. It's the survival song of District 12, passed down through generations.
And here's where it gets really personal and painful for Snow. When the Mockingjays pick up that melody, which they do after Katniss sings it, the source material calls this a slap in the face to Snow.
No.
Why is that specific sound so triggering for him?
Because it connects his ultimate political defeat to his original personal betrayal. He despises Lucy Gray, he despises the Covey, and he despises the Mataetian Mockingjays, the very birds he tried to eliminate. Yet the bird that becomes the symbol of the revolution is literally transmitting the melody of his lost love, amplified across all of Panem. It's a constant sonic taunt.
It's his past coming back to haunt his political present. And we know Katniss inherited her musical talent. Her father was such a great singer that Mockingjays stopped to listen. But she specifically notes that she wouldn't sing for the Capitol, unlike Lucy Gray.
That small difference is the key. Lucy Gray was the reluctant entertainer who invented the spectacle by singing for them. Katniss is the outright refusal. She refuses to play their game, even when she sings. She wields that music as a political weapon, not a charm.
Which brings us directly to the ultimate anthem of dissent, The Hanging Tree.
Lucy Gray sings a verse of that song while escaping Snow in the prequel. Decades later, Katniss sings the exact same song at that shared lake for the propaganda film. By transmitting that on Capitol TV, Snow would have heard it. A final musical declaration of war from the district and the girl he couldn't break.
Everything ties together, bringing us to Snow's specific, intense hatred for Katniss, which went way beyond political opposition. It was a vendetta.
It was a psychological obsession. A major reason for Snow's focus on Katniss is that she and Peter reminded him too much of himself and Lucy Gray. He fell in love with a District 12 tribute, and he saw that parallel play out again, a pair of star-crossed lovers that were fundamentally uncontrollable.
And the ultimate parallel is that moment of defiance at the end of the 74th Games, the Nightlock scene, when they prepare to die together.
That moment is a direct, deliberate echo of Lucy Gray's earlier statement that the District 12 tributes would go down together. It's the same gesture of ultimate romantic defiance copied decades later. To Snow, it wasn't just a threat to his power, it was a reenactment of the single greatest emotional failure of his life.
The obsession also seems fueled by another dark symbolic legacy, The snakes. The whole thing feels reptilian.
Oh, absolutely. References to venomous snakes appear early in the Hunger Games. That motif is directly connected to Dr. Gall's mutation snakes from the prequel, the one she unleashed in the arena. Dr. Gall's legacy is Snow's legacy. She taught him biological warfare and psychological manipulation.
And that cruelty is visible in the original trilogy, too. That terrifying carpet of writhing snakes in Mockingjay can be connected right back to those mutts. The Capitol's cruelty is deeply rooted and never forgotten, even if the districts are supposed to forget.
And we shouldn't overlook Tigress here. Aside from Snow, she's the only other character linking both storylines. Her quiet journey from a Capitol insider who loved Snow to someone aiding the rebellion in Mockingjay is a powerful, silent indictment of the man he chose to become. She saw the corruption up close and turned her back on it.
That makes the shift in focus between the books even more profound. Let's pivot now to the meta level, the thematic maturity of the prequel. I think a lot of readers felt there's a clear difference in the writing and thematic weight.
Yeah, the general consensus is that the original trilogy is a young adult series first and a dystopia second. It focuses narrowly on Katniss's personal journey, survival, the love triangle, leadership, which ends with her fulfilled in a meadow. The stakes are always personal.
But the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes feels like it has more analytical depth. It's almost like it was written for the original trilogy's audience, now grown up and ready for something politically denser.
Exactly. One reader source called it almost Orwellian, saying the dystopia stops being background scenery and takes center stage. The prequel focuses less on a single hero and more on the systemic devolution of Panem's society. It maximizes the damage of the games and, chillingly, gives you the perspective of the Capitol justifying oppression and viewing district residents as scum.
That deep dive into the Capitol mindset, the way they rationalize their cruelty, is what makes it feel so mature. It's the institutional horror of Dr. Gall's philosophy.
It's the explicit philosophical inspirations that make it feel next level. It explores the state of nature debate not as a suggestion, but as an active experiment. We see Snow becoming full Hobbesian, utterly convinced that without absolute control, life is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. He literally proves this through his actions.
And in contrast, you have Suzanne and Lucy Gray, acting as the embodiment of Locke and Rousseau, believing in the inherent goodness of humanity, the social contract, and the ability of people to govern themselves without a totalitarian hand.
The prequel isn't just connecting plot points, it's connecting these historical, political arguments that shape the entire world. And even the literary connections are deeper. Snow's name, Coriolanus Snow, is a specific reference to the Shakespearean tragedy Coriolanus, a story of a war hero exiled from Rome who turns against his own city out of bitterness and pride.
It's the ultimate setup for a character driven by resentment and ego.
And his name is also connected to the color white. Some readers interpret Coriolanus Snow as having a lingering Covey name, a permanent reminder of the family and the girl whose singing would ultimately serenade his downfall, linking classical literature directly to his fate.
So what does this all mean for the learner? Let's distill these connections into the essential knowledge.
I think the biggest takeaway is that the prequel confirmed President Snow's defining traits, his paranoia, his need for control, were deeply rooted not just in trauma, but specifically in his inability to control the only emotional experience that ever truly mattered to him, falling in love with the District 12 tribute.
And every major symbol of the eventual rebellion, the Mockingjay, the singing, the defiance of the tributes, the meadow, it can all be traced back directly to the legacy of Lucy Gray. Snow's obsession with control was ultimately the source code for the resistance.
So if the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes is considered a more mature, politically focused text written for the trilogy's original audience now grown up, we have to end with this thought.
The ultimate deep dive thought.
We have to ask, does this mean the true battle in Panem was never just about teenagers fighting for survival, but about the long-game philosophical war over human nature? And that the Capitol's greatest weapon was always just forgetting their own history and the foundational lessons taught by their first star?
A truly compelling thought to leave you with, especially considering how many times Snow tried to rewrite his own narrative. Thanks for diving deep with us.